Thank you.
All right, you want this? I'll give it to Larry. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce the speakers. This is my favorite thing because we really appreciate these people coming and talking to us either via Zoom or in living color. We're alive. It's alive. It's alive. And we're especially happy to have Larry and his wife PJ, who is. What is your role in the Coastal Bend Audubon?
I'm treasurer, membership director, and webpage.
Right, as you can see, they need volunteers too. PJ and Larry are a wonderful couple, and we're so glad you're here. They go from Corpus today. They're going to spend the night and then go back to Corpus tomorrow because their cat can't wait. Right? But Larry and I are both on the Audubon, Texas board. And I will tell you, Larry's kind of quiet sometimes, but if you sit next to him, you will not only learn things, you will laugh a lot too. He's one of those kind of guys that gets you in trouble. You know, you sit aside. My husband's like that too. But I've known Larry for, I don't know, for a long time. But Larry has a wonderful pedigree. Let me just tell you what he's done. He retired in 2020. I don't think he's standing still. I know that. He was director of the Heart Research Institute. That's part of Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. And he was the head of that for 17 years. And that's all involved in problem-solving research focused on the Gulf, the only Gulf in our neighborhood.
Of Mexico.
He was, before that, though, he was a senior director for aquatic resources for Texas Parks, TPWD, Texas Parks and Wildlife, for 23 years. Now, how did he do all that? He's not that old. He must have started when he was young. And he told me recently, he figured it out. He's a diver, or used to be. I don't know if he's doing that as much. We're getting him out birding more now. But he told me he figured it out. He's been 8 full months of his life have been spent underwater. Is that right, Larry? Yeah. Pretty much. Okay. So he also writes. He wrote a book in 2020 called Overview of the Gulf of Mexico. And it has been used as a resource by lots of people since that publication. He writes articles that translate science into English so that people can understand what scientists are doing and they will understand what's going on. He wrote an article in TPWD magazine called Texas Dead Zones. I don't want to go there. In September 23, he wrote Birds Everywhere with Lisa Gonzalez, who's the executive director of Audubon, Texas. So check those out. You can get them in the archives. He's a member of the Audubon Texas State Board and the Coastal Bend Audubon. So we're so glad to have you, and he's going to tell you about the damming of Texas. Thanks, Lauren.
Work actually, in particular, about who's the cut up at the board meeting. Next to her for disguise, but y'all are very lucky to have her on the board. She in all seriousness, she's been a great participant and leader on that board for years and represents you all very well. And I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk with you about this topic. I first started putting this talk together back about 25 or 30 years ago when I got tricked into debating Boone Pickett in a Dallas meeting, I think of EarthX, I think that's what it was, about water. I didn't win. I don't know if you know Boone Pickett, never heard of him. But we had a great debate, went on for an hour. I got the last word in, I said, Boone, I said, you just need to understand, we got enough water for all the people in Texas, we just don't have enough water for all their lives. And he laughed and cracked up, and we've been good friends before he passed ever since then. So it was a great event. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to debate anyone again unless I had all my facts together, and that started these talks. And what you're here tonight is the latest version of one that's been going on for 45 years. Maybe the last one I give. I always say that, but I never know when I'm going to give this talk again. But I hope you appreciate it and learn. I am a fast-talking Texan without an accent. I have an accent. I do not. I'll try to keep it. It's about getting a lot I want to go over with you tonight. Let's just get started. And the title obviously tells itself. We're talking about how Texas has changed over time. And as I was putting these talks together, I didn't realize until I was doing all this how much my family and my life has been defined by water. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and work this into it. But it seemed like everything from when I was born in 1949 through even today, water still drives that story. That's really what I'm hoping here to be able to talk to you about and demonstrate to you, get you the feeling that you're involved in that too. Water is defining what you all do and have done as well. And as a little sidebar, I'm going to tell you a story of something. I've never put this in any of my talks. Never put this in any of my talks. A little sidebar story about a group of folks in Resource Protection Division that I helped organize years ago that I had to disorganize. I had to hide away after they did all the work over the years. I kept it very quiet because I never wanted, many of them were still at Parks and Wildlife at the time. And I didn't want to make sure that they were not fired or anything like that. And one of them is here with me right now, Smiley Nava came, and thank you very much for being not Smiley. Smiley, just believe everything you hear. Don't correct. And I was very pleased. I started that job with Resource Protection together with a woman who's now passed, Susan Reed. So Susan was a great leader and a great friend. And very quickly after joining us at Parks and Wildlife, she moved on to become the chief advisor for Ann Richard, one of my favorites of all the governors I worked with. And I was fortunate after that also, Andy Sanson came along to be the director of Parks and Wildlife. He gave me a lot of cover for things I needed to do and kept me many times. So these were people who really helped put this group together. And you'll see how important they are as we go through this story. But back to my part of the story. My family came, I get correct as I say in front again. My family came to Texas as one of the original 300 and my direct ancestor, Thomas Freeman McKinney. And there were other McKinneys that came too. Colin, who signed the Declaration of Independence, Texas Declaration of Independence, and Robert, who was killed in the Alamo. So our family's been here for quite a while. Thomas made his acknowledgments or whatever because he and his partner funded the Texas Navy. Turned out to be not a very good investment. All those ships were captured or stolen, so all the money his money was lost in that thing. But he gave it a try. And so with that kind of heading, what I wanted to talk about is what we hear about is Texas exceptionalism and this type of thing, and how that. Yeah, you like that? It was perfectly legitimate to me. I don't know what you laugh about. But it's the idea, and really, of course, this city and the Alamo, this is ground zero for the whole myth and the whole idea of Texas and what Texans expect of things and how we overcome and all of that we're better than anybody else and all that. And that's part of what we're talking about here. And part of what I'm going to talk about is nature, because there has been a belief, and in this part of this, that nature was to be overcome and when necessary and bypassed as needed, or if we couldn't do any of that, there was always more Texas. There were no limits. And I think that's part of what has built this myth is that Texas is so resource plentiful, so big, that no matter what we did to it, we always find some place where we didn't do it and go from there. So that kind of builds on that. And that is the problem, because we always thought there was more land to be plowed, that there was more land to be grazed, there were more deer to shoot, more birds to bag, and more fish to catch. So we never saw those limits until really now. And when we did see limits, we just got up and moved to another part of Texas where there was none. And that's what my family did. Lost all our money trying to buy the Texas, to build the Texas Navy. So my part of the family moved west to Big Spring, Texas. Now, there's some realities about moving westward in Texas I wish my family had known. For example, we should have stopped at this last greenbelt there. Instead of going out to Howard County, where unlike land, there isn't always more water, but there's a lot of red sand. And so we learned that lesson going through that. And so my family and all of us that were early here in Texas, we were part of building and creating this myth that Texas could always overcome adversity, both myth and fact. But water, as we're going to talk about here tonight, that was the exception. And the impact of what happened to change this state occurred and is occurring in my lifetime, y'all's lifetime. In our lifetime, Texas has changed more than you can even imagine. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. And unfortunately, it occurred in our generation, but the impact of what those changes caused are going to echo all the way down through generations to come. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about here tonight. And the central theme of this is the drought of the 50s, 1950 to 1957. This, in my estimation, is the single most impactful environmental and socioeconomic event ever in Texas history. And that's what I'm going to try to prove to you tonight. And this is what it looked like. At least it looked like it in West Texas, where I grew up. If you want to understand it, the best book ever written about this was by Elmer Kelton. He really wrote a Western novel, but he wrote this book, Time It Never Rained. I read it when I was in the 25 or 30. Someone gave it to me. I read that book, and I put it back on my shelf, and I've never opened it again because where we were raised, and I was raised in West Texas, born in 1949, I went through the drought there. And I've talked to many of my colleagues and friends from West Texas in the past who've done the same thing. That book is that impactful. So if you ever want to know about the drought in the 50s, that's it. So my sister and I, we were raised during that time when the drought was going on. And I talked about it so much that the Texas Monthly put a report together, a special edition together about the drought, and they actually interviewed me. And I told them all kinds of stories, but the story that made it into that special edition was about when I was in the first and second grade. During a normal day, when we have a sandstorm come through, we were not allowed to leave the classroom to go to the buses, which were about 100 feet away from the school doors, to go home. When the sandstorms came through, they were afraid that we would be blown away and not even see the bus, because you could not see the bus. So the teacher, we all had to hold hands, and a teacher would lead us to the bus and count us before we left and when we got on the bus, make sure we got on there so no one could see anything. That happened a lot. So that's the kind of thing we lived in. That's the saying, when if you were born and raised in West Texas and were concerned about moving somewhere else, you could always take comfort in the fact that you'd never be worse. Certainly changed Texas, changed the people of Texas, it changed the face of Texas, and part of what we're going to talk about is certainly changed our coast. These are the things that we're going to talk about when we tell this story. The damming of Texas, the story about water, how we corralled it, and what it cost. And this is the group I mentioned earlier, Texas Partial Wildlife. This is a group of them. This is okay, there it is. We came together over the many years, and this is the group that developed all the recommendations for freshwater inflow that had to come into the bay, what it would take. We put a group together that every state and federal permit that affected wildlife in the state of Texas, this group reviewed, commented on, or did something about, started that, never missed a one. We established the first real endangered species program in the state. We actually had the legislature at the time gave us the authority to take anyone to court that we needed to that affected wildlife in the state of Texas. We were able to do that, and we did it pretty often at that time. We wrote all the legislation during that period of time. Do you see yourself up there, Tom? There he is. We wrote all anything that had to do with wildlife. We got in the legislation at the time. We'll talk about that a little bit. Most importantly, we were like the secret science. And by that, what I mean is, we worked really closely with the Audubons, the Sierra Clubs, the National Wildlife Federations, the Nature Conservancies, because I had the scientists and the experts. I had chemists, I had the hydrologists, I had geologists, I had everyone you could think of, even attorneys. And we covered all that, and we studied all these effects of reservoirs and all these types of things. We made that information public. Anybody could have it. But that way, the advocacy groups like yourself here, they're out pushing to try to save these lakes from bottom and hardwoods and all that. You didn't have to go out and get the scientists. We had it. And we did it for years. You'll see that throughout here. So 144 heroes, I think, that never got the credit they were due because we had to keep it quiet all the time. We knew what would happen if anyone figured out what we were doing. And so but a big part of my job was to make sure that they kept it going and kept it quiet until everyone was starting to retire. So now I can talk about it.
Larry, that's me right in the corner.
That's Smiley right there. There's Smiley. But I'm going to try to give them their due tonight. We're talking about that now. So let's get started. Okay, so finally, all that set up. Now I'm going to talk about what I told you I was going to talk about. And here's the map of Texas. It looks like there's a lot of water in Texas, but in reality, of course, there's not a lot of water. It should be blue. Some of it should be brown or tan. Water. But that's our river system. And so what you'll see as we go through this, up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a timeline starting in 1913, and that timeline will run through today till today. Over in the right-hand side, the population during that 10-year period, about that type of thing. And the bottom left, we'll talk about what percentage of the population was rural and urban. That's a big important issue there. And occasionally we'll put some little snarky comments about that. And I'm only going to put reservoirs of over 50,000 acre feet. There are a lot of smaller ones, but 50,000 acres is a serious size. And just to give you an idea of what's there's some reservoirs on the side there, a canyon, which you may be familiar with here. But those are reservoirs that are 202,000 acre feet. Of course, you should probably know that what is an acre feet? It's a measurement of water. It's the amount of water that will cover an acre, an area about the size of a football field, a little larger, 1 foot deep. It's kind of an odd type thing, but it's an agricultural based type thing. It means something there. Yeah.
I don't understand what you said. Why are these lakes or what are these bodies?
Just examples. In case you've got a concept of what an acre foot of water is, or 50,000 acres.
Just examples.
Just some ideas of size. If you know that, when you might give you a feeling.
There was a reason you picked those.
Just examples. Okay. Now let's get started. 1913. Before 1913, there were no reservoirs in Texas. The population, about almost 4 million. Definitely a rural state. 76% of all Texans live out in the country someplace. Very few lived in cities. Now there were lakes. There were some lakes in Texas, and the ones that you see, some notice that big lake out in West Texas, Cattle Lake, that was created by a log jam on the Cattle River. That was famous there, and then Green Lake at Houston. There were probably others, but there were very few lakes in Texas before 1913. During 1913 and 1949, the year I was born, there were a number of lakes. All those black dots, there were a number of reservoirs built over 50,000 acre feet. Our population is still very, very much rural dominated, but the Dust Bowl of the 1930s occurred then. It really affected mostly northern Texas. And if you'll take a look, pay attention as we go along Dallas. Dallas figured out before anyone else how important water is, how valuable it was, and what a political tool it was. Because they knew that they decided they were going to control that entire region. They control the water there. They control all of that part of the state. And Dallas got water. They understand it. And you'll see it as we go through. 1950 and 1959, this is the drought of record. As many reservoirs were built in that 10-year period as all the time before that. But take a look at what happened to our population in that 10-year period. Basically the rural areas of Texas were abandoned. They just could not survive. There was no water. Now my family, a few others, we stuck with it stupidly, but we did. I think, but we hung in and lived off red dirt for the most part. But you can see the state just changed in that 10-year period as we started to respond to that drought of the 50s because we knew we had to have water in the state. But new go. San Antonio is another city that gets water because in that same period of time, the Edwards Underground Water District was formed in '59, understanding that we had the record low of the Edwards Aquifer at 612 feet at that time. And so that district was formed as one of the first to begin to manage groundwater. San Antonio is one of the 2 or 3 cities in the state of Texas that understand water, the value of it, and what to do with it. So they have they have done that. I think they get a good credit for that. 1960 to 69, our population is almost 10 million. It's really the golden age of big reservoirs. So really, a lot of reservoirs were built, some really big ones. Homestead, 3 million acre feet. Toledo Bend, 4.5 million acre feet. Even Canyon at almost 400,000 acre feet. So there were a lot of, this was a big time for building dams and making sure we had water for that growing population, which has doubled in that period that we've been talking about. Our state is solidly urban now, 75% that are in our cities there. From 1970 to 79, now all the good places to build reservoirs in the state that made sense have been taken up. Now we started looking for places, any place we could stick a reservoir that might catch some water. And this is when the environmental damage really started to hit. Now, the big dams, they took their toll. But now we're looking everywhere, as you can see, in that type of place. And in 80 to 89, we are solidly urban. 80% of our folks are there. And this is the time, what we used to call the Cadillac Desert. The water hustlers come to Texas. If you want to understand water and what happens with water development, you need to read Cadillac Desert. It's not about our state, but it's about the West, but it gives you the idea. What happened in Texas during this time is that groups, companies of what we call water hustlers, they don't like to call that, but they were engineers and attorneys, would come together, and they were going through Texas out into mostly rural areas where they would talk folks into, hey, here's a great spot for a dam. And the counties had bonding authority, so they could get bonds, taxpayer-funded bonds, to build giant reservoirs. And so they would be talked into building the reservoirs and selling the bonds, getting a tax obligation on all those people in those small communities. Then the water hustlers then would build the dams. The engineers would make money off that. They would nearly always try to control the real estate around the reservoirs. They would sell all that land, make their profit off that. They would move off, and leaving the folks in that region, in that taxing area, to pay off the bond where they could sell the water.
What kind of role did the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation have in this in Texas?
They had their own programs going. They were building reservoirs and that type of thing. And of course, the Corps of Engineers came in and get permits for all of these. That was how that was their role. So this was really the heyday of resource protection. This is where we got in our biggest fights over reservoirs, of trying to make sure that reservoirs that shouldn't be built, that had such tremendous impact, we couldn't afford to have them done. And so that was where the fight really took place. And resource protection got noticed by a lot of people that probably wish they hadn't, but that's a whole other story. But I do tell you that we had a very secret meeting one time when we stopped our 5th reservoir from being constructed. We became aces. We had a few special T-shirts made that we would not wear anywhere. Our 5th reservoir, and the big one was the last, was the Little Cypress Reservoir, and that one was one that we actually lost in the permit. They got the permit, but we had made such a case for it. The people that had to come in and vote the money to get it, they voted it down twice, and it was Little Cypress was never built. For about 10 or 15 years, every July, I wrote a Park and Wildlife magazine. July edition was all about water, or some relation to water. And in this one, the state of Lake, that's where I finally wrote about that. People caught on. I should have kept my mouth shut. Okay. And also part of this I talked about this is where our biggest coup legislative was. We actually got the state of Texas to include the environment, fish and wildlife, as a legitimate beneficial use for water, along with industry, agriculture, and municipality. Wildlife or an environment was now a legitimate use for saving water. We got that locked in. That was our biggest legislative victory of that period. 1920 to 2000, we're just keep moving more urban. The depopulation of Texas, rural Texas, is pretty much done. There's very few reservoir sites left, but some are being built at that time. Texas exceptionalism was beginning to fade pretty extensively. We used to do surveys of cities in Texas and comparing them to other states around the country. You could not tell the difference between citizens of Dallas and New York or New Jersey or anywhere. They were all urbanized. Our Texas exceptionalism, except for a few places like San Antonio and a few others, had all been disappeared. This also was the most important period of time for wildlife. Senate Bill 1, Lieutenant Bob Bullitt, one of the great politicians in the history of Texas, rewrote all the water laws because he recognized how important water was for the future, and he allowed us, resource protection, to come in and add all kinds of things to help protect fish and wildlife. We got all kinds of things in the code. Now, hadn't been much of the political will to make them all work, but they're all there to help take care of wildlife, and that's something we'll talk about in a second as well. Take a look at Dallas. Dallas never forgot about water. They built dams and they control that whole area. And during that same time, the Edwards-Aquifer Authority came into being, which was established in 1993, and really started the trend for managing groundwater throughout the state, setting up groundwater districts for these types. Formation of the EA was the direct response to an endangered species lawsuit that was brought by the Sierra Club. That really started the whole thing, and that's where our endangered species program supported that. And I had to make them disappear because a big group of folks came after them once that happened. But that was serious stuff when you cause the creation of that groundwater pumping control. And that's a whole different story, but it involves a Hall of Fame baseball player and a commissioner and all kinds of things we had to do. We'll tell that some other time. I don't have time, but it was a lot of sleight of hand magician thing. I had to get rid of that division. All I did was change the name and call it something else, and everyone else thought it was gone, and everyone was safe. We kept doing it. I walked around and kept my mouth shut. Well, that's a whole different story. 2025, also, we were doing a lot of bold things. We were exposed. The resource protection group was exposed. They knew who we were, so they were coming after us anyway. So we just got on the horse and decided to go get things. And Choke Canyon Reservoir was built, and the city of Corpus Christi did not want to allow any water out of that Choke Canyon to go down to Nueces Bay. They wanted it all for the city. It's hard to believe when you have a city who's named for the bay and lives on it, and they were willing to split their bay, turn it into a sewage treatment plant. But I thought I wasn't going to let it happen. It just so happens that Parks and Wildlife had just finished building the Choke Canyon State Park, their big state park on that brand new lake. I managed to convince the commission to not open that park unless we had enough water coming down to the river to get to the bay to take care of it. And the commission stood up for it. And we closed it, wouldn't let it open. And so it started a big war. And I spent 2 or 3 weeks walking up and down the Nueces River as we were releasing different levels of water to figure out how much water we needed. We got it figured out. And eventually we prevailed. And they released the water. But I was not welcome in Corpus Christi for many years. We lived there. Those people passed on, and I moved in behind them. They never knew. They never knew. But I don't go to the park still. So 2020 to 2025, where we are now. There's only been 2 new reservoirs built in this period of time. So reservoirs have really stopped now. That one is Bodark up in the northeast part of the state. There's a second one, Lake Ralph Hall was built. It will be operational in 2026, but that's the only reservoir that have been built. We're done with the reservoir days pretty much. It's just there's no place left to do them for one thing. And of course, we have issues we're going to have to deal with your yacht. Y'all know what's going on with that. So water's coming back again. We have a drought down in South Texas, a drought around Texas. We're coming back in that drought period, and that's during the historical hydrological cycle, as we say it. Everyone now is finally getting interested in water. Should have been interested in water 10 years ago. And the city of Corpus Christi is once again totally lost. So trying to figure out what to do for all late, but that's the issue we're back. It's all coming back to us now. And as I said, this is not the end of the story, of course, but it's really going to be for others, you all like yourself, to fill in the next chapter, because the projected population of the state of Texas is likely to be 50 million. 50 million. Where we're going to get the water and everything else for 50 million Texans, I don't know. That's what we're dealing with, and so good luck with that. I'm retired. I'm glad to tell you what you should do. I'm full of that, but I don't know if I can really help you get it done. That's what you all have to do and what we have to talk about here. But I do want to say something about this, and of course I've been on it pretty hard, but really it is an amazing engineering feat. We're recovering from the drought of the 50s and recognizing what happened and what we did in that lifetime, because none of us would be here today if we had not dealt with those reservoirs, take care of the water, did what we did, and put all the connection. It is an amazing engineering and political and policy feat. That is Texas exceptionalism, getting that done. But even though that's the story we're told now, and unlike some, as I say here, unlike some Texas stories, it is all true. But what we haven't done is what it cost, and that's what I want to kind of wrap this up here with. To make sure I'm on schedule, is to talk about what it cost to accomplish all of that. Because we've lost 16 million acres of riparian habitat. 60% of that is lost due to dams. 63% of our bottomland hardwoods were lost by the 1980s, nearly all due to dams. We had over 281 major springs, but by 1973, only 2 very large ones were flowing, and 31 of the big ones were the only ones left. So mostly due to groundwater pumping. So you all know more about that than just about anyone. So I'm going to talk to you about that. Our coast, our Texas coast from 1950 through today, basically what we've done to it about taking the water away from it, our coast is about 30 to 40% of what it once was. And that is due almost all entirely to dams, because water is the lifeblood of our Texas coast. Water brings in salinity ingredients that many animals need. They bring in nutrients. They bring in sediments that keep the wetlands from drowning. That's what they do. Just to give you a specific example, when Choke Canyon Dam was closed in 1982, the dam was closed off, cutting the water off. Freshwater inflows to our coast were reduced by 55%. By the early 1990s, every oyster reef in the bay was dead. Was gone. In fact, the biggest one across Nueces, the causeway between Corpus Christi and Portland now sits on top of that oyster reef. They used to connect the two shores, and so that those are gone. That's the cost that we're talking about. Texas has lost about half of its 1.2 million acres of wetlands, mostly on the coast, since 1950, mostly due to the 2 dams. Almost half of Texas estuarine areas are closed to shellfish harvest due to pollution since the 1950s, mostly due to dams. But other things too, but that loss of fresh water hurt. And of course, water birds haven't escaped any of that because of reduced food sources and all of those types of things. In fact, in 2019, I decided to put a report card together, talk about the state of the coast. I want to understand where we were with our coast. And so I brought some of the world's leading experts together on putting these types of things together, putting them together all around the world. We came up with this ABC scoring, which makes sense for people understand that. And when we used indicator species to give us an idea of what was going on. So we put it together like this. As you might expect, the worst hit of all of the parts of Texas was habitat. Oysters and seagrass were the 2 worst hit, have had the greatest impact. But birds were not close behind. Our indicator species there kind of fell in between moderate and poor. I mean, oysters terns seemed to be doing really well, but everybody else was down, as you might expect. But surprisingly enough, overall, the coast still had a B-. And that I'm talking to you speaks how resilient the Texas coast is and has been and continues to be. And that's part where this Texas exceptionalism type issue gets at us, because we just expect it to keep coming back no matter what we do to it. But it always has. No matter what we take from it or what we do, look at what it looks like now. It's still wonderful. But we're about to face something that's going to put that test of resilience to a test. Because resilience will not deal with this. What I'm talking about, of course, is climate change. Climate change is the attractive way, and climate change doesn't go back and forth like seasons. It just moves relentlessly forward, and trying to adopt to that is very, very difficult. As I tell people when I give this talk, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. And there are three factors we face on our coast. The oceans are warming, the sea level is rising, and the oceans are becoming more acidic. As my favorite philosopher Yogi Berra says, the future ain't what it used to be. We have issues that we have to deal with. And so I used to give this talk pretty regularly to a group of outdoor writers, a great group of folks. And every year I would be invited there to tell them, give them the state of the environment, what's going on. And about the third year I did it, I can't think of the gentleman's name who introduced me. I will think of it, but I'm not going to mention it. And he said, well, today we're going to hear from Dr. Doom. And that was my moniker from that day on. Somebody talking Dr. Doom, and it didn't bother me a little bit that I was always giving talks and ending up telling about how the world was coming in. So I swore, no, I don't do that anymore. When I give talks like this, I'm going to end it on something upbeat or something positive. We're not going to be going down the hill all the time, because otherwise, why would I get up out of the bed the next morning? So we got to come up with something like that. But one last thing, just to tell you, this is on March 4th, 2025. This is the largest sandstorm ever recorded coming across Texas. You see where Big Spring is? It came out of Big Spring. It's the first time the West Texas came to me in Corpus Christi, because I had red dust little charges like you all did here in San Antonio. Like I say, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, not their own facts. We do have issues to deal with. That's my last Dr. Doom part of this. So we're going to go not Dr. Doom. But it's just really important. Because, like I said, the Texas coast and the Gulf, they are incredibly resilient. They really are. I've had the opportunity in my professional career over 56 years or so, and working in the Gulf. I've probably seen more of Texas than just about anybody else. Patsy said 8,000 dives, almost 8 months underwater, all around the Gulf. I've just been privileged to see much of what we have here in Texas. And while it may be too late to restore what we've lost, it's certainly not too late to save what we have. And what we have is incredibly spectacular. It's moving. I mean, you know that. You get out and see the birds all the time. So there is so much here to be saved. In 1923, our Hart Research Institute did a much better job of a report card than I ever could do. And they took a look at the entire Texas coast, of course. And yes, they reported being vulnerable. There are issues we got to look at, but just like we found in 2019, it's still healthy and functioning. It may not be as big as what it used to be, but our Gulf of Mexico and our Texas coast are still producing birds and doing its jobs. We know more about our Gulf and Texas than any time in the past. In my lifetime, in the last 25 years, we've increased our knowledge base tremendously. And we have organizations that are coming together to take this information together, to take it and use it to help us understand how to better manage these things, groups, and this type of thing. So we've got the science coming together to help us understand this. We have some of the best environmental and water experts in the world and the tools to have it. No one has a better understanding of what water impact is in the state of Texas than Texas. People from all around the world come here to talk to our scientists about how to deal with that. And at HRI, we have scientists. You tell them what scientists that are so good at their modeling, so whether you give them a condition to the future, they're going to tell you what coastline Texas is going to look like, and it's really accurate. So we have all of those tools. And we have organizations, again, trying to help us. National Academy of Science, even the General Land Office is putting together a resiliency plan to help us become better prepared for the future. So there's lots of people working out there to help us going forward into the future. And most importantly, and this is when I left the Parks and Wildlife as an AG and went back to the university. I spent only 25 years at the university, but the last 17. I almost forgot how great graduate students are. And when I went and spent part research and looked at the students that were working there, I just tell you, I'm glad I wasn't in graduate school because I couldn't keep up with those. We have a great group of young scientists, young folks here that we just got to give them the tools and we got to give them the ability to do it. So that's for me is my greatest thought going forward. We got folks who are stepping up, help take care of all of us old folks that have had too much to drink. So yeah, what am I telling you? Yes, there is a chance. There's a chance, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to take all of us working together, as we have done in the past, to do this type of thing. We have the tools are there to do it. We have the platform to do it. What we have to generate, that's what we have to generate. That's what groups like this group does, and Sierra Club and others, is to drive the political will to make it happen. And believe me, we all know we're being challenged right now, but we cannot back off. We just have to outlive the bastards. That was all in my section and resource protection. We'll just outlive the bastards. Just hang in, don't give up. Because everything else that exists there, we got to get our flock together to fight. Because believe me, as I told you, Texas is a place of incomparable beauty. It's worthy of all of our best efforts to conserve both now and for those to come. And with that, I appreciate you spending a little time with us this evening. Where we are.
We have time for a few questions. Now, if you have a question, please wait till the microphone comes by so that people on the Zoom can hear us. Okay? Here we go. Paul?
Would you care to share your opinion or facts about the amendment on water this time around? Number 4.
Can you repeat the question?
You have to tell us what it is.
Okay, stand up, Paul. And read
Everybody
it.
understand. And then
Okay, wait. Got a good vote.